So we'll make a start. So welcome everyone to Public Accountability Board for the 6th of December, slightly delayed start, and as usual we are being filmed so that if anyone doesn't want to be filmed, doesn't want to be seen, then they should take appropriate action. And we're a hybrid meeting. Some of us are in the room, not many of us today, and some of us are online. It's all being recorded. So in the room I have with me the Chief Constable, Ron Poltney, the Deputy Chief Constable, Tim Forber, Dan Thorpe, one of the Assistant Chiefs, and then Fiona Toplis from my office, Josh Keeling, who we welcome. He's a new member of the comms team from the production unit, Sally Parkin, and a couple of operatives from the company that deal with our filming. And I won't go through all those who are online, but you can probably see who they are from the sidebar. So welcome. On to item 3, which is the announcements on our agenda. Just a couple, I think. Well, I've welcomed Josh, that I was going to do. And also we ought to note, I think, that Ian Prophet is now the District Commander for Doncaster, which we didn't know about until today in these meetings. So welcome to him. And no doubt we'll duly see him when the Doncaster report is made. Public questions. We do have a couple of public questions, and I'll read the question and I'll also read the answer so that we've got them on the record. So these are from members of the public who remain anonymous, but the first question is this: it is to be welcomed that SYP are establishing a force-led violence against women and girls independent advisory group to help SYP understand how the police response to women and girls can be improved. Question: by when will this become operational? How will the membership be determined? Who is likely to be invited to become a member? And will the group also address the issue of the safety of women and girls in public places? So I've got an answer to that, which reads as follows: South Yorkshire Police and the Office for Police and Crime Commissioners Violence Against Women and Girls Independent Advisory Group, this is a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? You must find a way of shortening that, is being launched in January. The IAG will be made up of representatives from organisations and individuals across South Yorkshire who have experience in responding to or having lived experience of male violence against women and girls. We're hoping to use the OPCC, the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner, listening event in December and already establish networks across South Yorkshire to identify members. The IAG will provide advice and guidance on improving trust and confidence, improving the police response to DAWP, and creating safer spaces for women and girls across South Yorkshire. And then there's a second question. It's also to be welcomed that the OPCC and the Violence Reduction Unit are leading work with the police and partners to influence attitudinal and societal change, especially around attitudes of men and boys in South Yorkshire to women and girls, their notions of masculinity and who they look to as role models. Question: is there a programme for this work? How is it being undertaken and by whom? So I have an answer to that. The VRU and the OPCC have started work to address violence against women and girls by running some engagement events to ensure we listen to organisations and individuals to hear what the people consider the priorities should be. This engagement process started in November and will continue into the new year. We will use the feedback to develop an action plan of activities. As part of the work to influence attitudinal and societal change, especially around attitudes of men and boys in South Yorkshire to women and girls, we propose a high-profile media campaign. The OPCC was successful in securing £70,000 from the Safer Streets Free Fund to target violence against women and girls, perpetrator behaviour and attitudes, and a further £15,000 to undertake wider consultation to capture the voices of people from all backgrounds and cultures. The communications team is working closely with SYP and with local authority communications leads, represented by Sheffield City Council, to appoint an agency to develop a high-profile campaign that will launch in the first quarter of 2022. The campaign will look at tackling perpetrator behaviour and attitudes that will help to improve the safety of women in public places. It will also look at encouraging bystanders to report incidents and support victims. Further details will be available in due course. Further actions will lead from the feedback from the engagement activity being undertaken. So that was all a bit of a mouthful. I don't know whether, Lauren, you want to add anything to that. You may feel that quite enough there.
I think that was a relatively comprehensive answer. Obviously, violence against women and girls is a key national work stream as well as here for us locally. We're all looking forward to, I think, to the victim listening event next week. And we're currently coming towards the end of the 16-day campaign, and actually at the end of this meeting today I'll be doing some comms which we'll be putting out both internally and externally, which are really supportive of the messages that you've just given, really, about changing attitudes around women and girls.
Thank you. Yes, we've got the round table next week. Fiona, is that, I forgot where it is it Sheffield United?
Yes.
Sheffield United, yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you, that was public questions. Don't think there are any more, Sally, that we know of. Thank you. So item 5 then is urgent items, and we usually at this point ask the Chief Constable if you just say a word around coronavirus, where things are at, particularly with the new regulations now, the Omicron virus, and what that means for shopping and what the police response. I think that's what the public want to know, what the response is going to be.
I'm going to hand that one to Dan Thorpe if I can, because he's sat there with the briefing, I think, around coronavirus.
Of course, yeah, I can provide an update from a force perspective and then sort of the wider piece. I mean, first of all, just to sort of register the impact on the force, the abstraction rate, specifically for COVID-19 abstractions, is at 3.1%, so it's still relatively small, and we're holding firm on that. We are seeing an increase since the end of November, so it'll be interesting to see how that develops, certainly with the new strand of Omicron, and see how, or if that has an impact. But I think it's relatively obvious for all to see that we are going to anticipate increased absence due to that variant. Following the change in regulations surrounding face coverings in certain situations, our senior solicitor, as he did with the original one, has interpreted that legislation and produced some real strong guidance to our officers and staff to ensure that any enforcement follows the same approach as last time, really, which is focused on the 4 E's around engage, explain, encourage and enforce. So we do have enforcement processes that we can undertake, but it will be very much each case on its merits, depending on the circumstances, but that is still an option for officers depending on the circumstances. And once we're currently, to make it easier for our officers, we're going to transfer some of that guidance onto handheld devices that officers have available to them, so it's all there for people to see and use. So that's effectively a very brief rundown around the COVID situation.
The emails I get from people are specifically around public transport. Will mask wearing be enforced by the police, or to what extent can you do that on public transport? And Meadowhall is the other. Oh, and Frenchgate and Meadowhall. Don't you want to say anything about that specifically?
Well, I think, as Dan articulated, really, it's that 4 E's approach. We'll say that we've taken right throughout the pandemic. Ultimately the law has changed for a reason. We don't want to be heavy-handed with it, but ultimately, having gone through that 4 E's process and trying to educate people and encourage people, if people still refuse to wear a mask, it will be enforced.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'd just say that I think there's some local coverage yesterday indicating that compliance seems to be quite high here anyway, sort of over 90% seen them wearing masks at Meadowhall. And I think, to be fair, the public of South Yorkshire have always responded really well to the guidance that's come out and have understood the requirement on them to do their bit and to wear a mask appropriately. I think that's what we're still seeing at this moment in time.
Yeah. And with constantly changing rules and regulations, it sometimes takes a while for people to remember what the current situation actually is. Okay, thank you. That was item 5. Item 6, items to be considered in the absence of the public and the press. Don't think there are any. Looking to Sally, there aren't any. Item 7, declarations of interest. If there are any, both you know about, you should know about. Okay, item 8 is the minutes of the PAB held on the 9th of November, pages 5 to 14. Anybody got any comments on any of that, or can we take those as a true correct record? What took place? Those who are remote, I think you'll just have to jump in and shout, because I'm not actually positioned in such a way that I look directly at the screen, so we think they're all right. So arising from that, on page 15 are actions from the minutes. And Michelle, you're on the line. I think we're only...
Yes. The first one, Commissioner 419, is ongoing. The evaluation is not yet ready, but Tim will bring that back when it's available. 424 in relation to domestic related rapes. Tim may have an update.
Yeah, I do. So there's no national data available in relation to that question, but we have made some inquiries with peer forces, and I think it's suffice to say we are broadly comparable in terms of the split around domestic and non-domestic rapes. What is interesting though, and I think it is worthy of mention, is what we have seen. If you look back to 2019, the proportion of domestic rape offences was 28% of overall offences, rising to 34 now. That can be one of two things that could suggest that domestic rape has increased during the lockdown period. The flip side of it, the proportion of non-domestic rape because of lockdown and lack of nighttime economy, that's decreased. So I think we'll keep an eye on that just to see how that fleshes out over time. But in answer to the actual action to complete it, we are broadly comparable with peer forces.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Right, shall we move then to force performance, and that's item 10 on the agenda. And this is the where we look at the districts by turn, and it's Barnsley's turn. And James, I can see your name, James Abdi, the Chief Super at Barnsley. I can see you on the board. I don't think you can reveal yourself. And I'm not,
bear with us one moment, Commissioner.
well, we can hear you, which is a...
Sorry, I've had a few IT issues. Is that better?
We can hear you, and we can now see you. So that's a triumph for technology. And yes, you're well in view there, and your two plants, which are flourishing, I might say, more than mine. So item 10 then is the force performance report from the Barnsley district, and Chief Superintendent James Abdi is presenting that report. We won't, as last time, James, we won't go through that in detail, but I'll pick out one or two things if I may and ask you about them, and then if there are things you want to sweep up at the end, please do. So if I take you first of all to the first page, page 17 in my pack, section 3, 3.2, I just noticed there that as far as your command team is concerned in Barnsley, you seem to have quite a lot of temporary posts, and I just wonder if you could say a word about that, because on the face of it, it looks as if you're struggling a bit, or something like that.
So, yeah, apologies, Commissioner. It is quite difficult just to pick up the sound at your end. So, if I do ask you to clarify the question, if I didn't hear it right, I do apologise for that. Yeah, I think we're asking about 3.2 in terms of changes to the district command team. Certainly from a Barnes perspective, we have a very good, strong, stable command team, and whilst we've got a number of temporary posts in there, they are individuals and officers that are very experienced, very capable, and have worked at the district for some time. The most recent changes have seen Paul Ferguson step up from Chief Inspector to Temporary Superintendent, which has created a vacancy at Chief Inspector. And one of the Chief Inspectors now transferred back to West Yorkshire Police. So, yes, whilst we do have two temporary Chief Inspector posts at the moment, the force is in the process of finalising the current round of promotions for Chief Inspectors, and I'm optimistic that as we move into the new year, we'll be able to sort of put those posts into some degree of permanence and move forward as a command team. But certainly, nothing from my perspective that would give any concern regarding how the district's been managed and led. The team are working really hard, and it's a very stable team and all know each other very, very well.
Can I perhaps just add a bit to that, Commissioner? So the appointment of Paul Ferguson as temporary superintendent, that came about with Move Cherie Buttle, who was superintendent to head of Atlas Comms, to strengthen that area of business for us. And we're really positive about that move. As regards the Chief Inspector's process, I am currently chairing that process. It's taking place. I've interviewed 22 candidates over, or will have done by Friday, to fill a number of vacancies across the force. That process concludes on Friday. We'll be making appointments next week, and we will be making decisions about who goes where before the Christmas break.
Okay. That's quite a big, big number. Yes. Okay. Thought you were a bit weary. But
Just how we always look.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. We're on page 18 now and 4.3. You're talking there, James, about overall volume of incidents, and you say, and it's in your bullet points there, that 39% of incidents are resolved without deployment. And if I remember the public reading that, I'd probably read that as meaning that you didn't send an officer out. And I just wonder what that means, and what the implications of that are. If you could just explain what it means to say without deployment.
Yeah, of course. I think the police, as with other emergency services, receive a whole range of calls about many incidents. Some clearly are crime related, some are non-crime related, and some incidents often just require a degree of reassurance or noting and that awareness, really. So the resolved without deployment incidents are the ones where there's been a clear and professional assessment of any threat and risk that may be relevant. All of the crimes and incidents that would warrant a need a response are appropriately sort of categorised and scheduled for that within the different categories that we have. But there will always be a degree of incidents where it's absolutely proportionate, professional, and the right response to actually listen to the concerns of the caller, if possible, to deal with that at that point of contact, and then to alert other agencies as is necessary, or other internal departments, neighbourhood policing teams, etc., as is necessary, just so people are aware of it. So whilst it will always account for a proportion of our resolution to incidents, I can certainly provide that reassurance that the ones that we need to get to, we do. We make sure that those are prioritised. These are the numerous types of incidents that don't necessarily warrant a police officer turning up to actually deal with it in person.
Okay. Can you just say a word around residential burglaries? Because I know at one time you were saying that you always attend a residential burglary call out, but is that still true?
Yes, I mean, residential burglary is one of those key priority neighbourhood crimes for us, and certainly within Barnsley we maintain very low levels of burglary. We sort of average between 2 and 3 a day. When incidents happen of residential burglary in Barnsley, we prioritise it, we attend it, and we seek to maximise our opportunities to recover evidence, identify who the offenders are, and bring them to justice. It is one of our key priority crime areas, and it's one that we do attend.
Thank you. On 4.5, the same page a little bit lower down, you talk about, right at the bottom, Barnsley is currently experiencing around 2,100 recorded crimes per month. I just wondered if you could, or whether you know, how does that compare, not with last year, but with the pre-COVID period? Are we back yet at a pre-COVID period?
Yes, absolutely. We're starting to see a return really to sort of similar levels to 2019. Obviously 2020 figures will always be distorted because of the impact of COVID, but that doesn't mean that the nature of those crimes are exactly the same. Clearly there has been a shift in some types of crimes over that period, and we still very much are returning to, or have been returning to, a degree of what would normally be expected, but clearly sort of recent events nationally in relation to COVID may well impact further on that. We may see a return to different levels because of the anticipated COVID impact during the sort of Christmas winter period, but certainly what we've been experiencing in the months leading up to December is what we would have anticipated. as we came out of the COVID restrictions and as we would have anticipated, looking at our normal seasonal crime trends that we experience.
Section 4.9 in my pack, Operation Duxford. I was just saying these are always good events, lots of things happen in them. I was just drawn to bullet point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, recovery of 250 wraps of crack cocaine and ketamine. I just wondered whether ketamine, I don't think I've seen that actually referred to in a report before, maybe wrong, whether this is a growing trend. And I know I've heard officers talk about ketamine possibly as the drug used in spiking, if there is a drug being used in spiking. I just wonder if you could say something around that.
Yes, of course. I think ketamine is one of those drugs that is emerging and becoming more popular. In terms of any sort of links to spiking, I think nationally, recent data from the NPCC sort of indicates there's been about 198 sort of confirmed reports of drink spiking in September and October across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, and also in addition to that, I think 24 reports relating to possibility around injections. But in relation to most of those, the most common types of drugs, whilst ketamine is on the list, it is one of a number including things such as GHB, but alcohol is actually one of the main causes as well. So it's absolutely a possibility. It is one thing that is being looked at nationally. I think locally, it's important that firstly we do understand what is causing any incident of spiking, and that actually takes some time to get to, because if you sort of follow the process from an investigation point of view, that when we get a response to a report of spiking, firstly it's taken very, very seriously. We have an enhanced investigative response to that. Part of the investigation is about establishing exactly what drug or other factor may have been which was being used in any spiking, and that requires sending items off for forensic analysis and waiting for the results of such things. So at this stage, there's nothing specific to say that ketamine is a particular issue in Barnsley and spiking is a particular issue, but we do have a number of reports that we are following up and monitoring on a daily basis through our daily management meetings. And so I think it's relevant context and absolutely right that it's sort of flagged up there, but no defined link locally that we see to spiking, but one that we are absolutely looking for as part of our investigative response.
Thank you very much. Can we go to the section protecting vulnerable people and domestic abuse? This is 5.1. And you say there that Barnsley has comparatively high levels of domestic abuse related incidents per 1,000 of the population. However, when you're doing this comparison of the 3-month period from August to October 21, Barnsley shows a 1% decrease in reported DA crimes and a 12% decrease in domestic abuse non-crimes. I just wonder if you could explain the difference between a DA crime and a DA incident, and also comment on those figures, whether this is something to be welcomed or, well, what do we make of them?
Yes, I think on the first point in relation to the sort of difference between a domestic related crime and a domestic abuse and non-crime incident, I think any incident that comes in that is domestic related goes through a very, very similar process in terms of assessing the vulnerability and any threat that actually posed. But then there's also the question as actually the details of the report. Does what is reported to us amount to a crime that would require recording in line with national crime recording standards, and then subsequently investigating as part of that? Or is it actually an incident that's being reported which may be relatively minor in nature and may not actually be a crime in itself? And that might be people reporting and raising some concerns that don't actually amount to a crime. We still capture both of those, so we understand actually what the demand is in relation to domestic related crimes, what the demand is related to domestic related non-crime incidents, and to make sure that first and foremost across both of those categories the appropriate safeguarding measures are put in place with our partner agencies. So there is a distinction between the two. Also, as part of our work to ensure crime data accuracy and ensure the public have confidence around that, we We scrutinise all of our domestic related reports, and if there's any suggestion in there of a crime, we ensure that it is crime at the earliest opportunity, which the public can take confidence from. So that may account for some of the decrease in sort of non-crime incident that we're actually criming things earlier. However, it is also possible that we still may be experiencing some of the impacts around COVID, and actually as we came out of lockdown measures in the sort of 3 months previous, then the sort of volume of domestic related incidents and crimes that we're seeing, whilst small and marginally small, may well be attributable to people coming outside of their homes, and society starting to reshape as we go through the recovery phase, as opposed to being people locked down in their homes experiencing domestic abuse, which we did see somewhat through the COVID period, particularly during lockdown. So that may well account for those sort of marginal reductions. That said, domestic abuse continues to be a key priority for us in Barnsley. We monitor and scrutinise all reports on a daily basis. We prioritise efforts to go out and arrest the people that are perpetrating it, and we continue to make sure that the public have confidence by recording all crimes when, on balance probabilities, there is that information there that warrants such a crime being recorded.
Thank you, that's helpful. I'm on page 20 now, which is 5.5, and this is Operation Encompass, which is the work with secondary schools, reporting into schools of any domestic incidents. And I notice there that you say that there were 695 alerts, notifications to schools in this particular period. And I presume that doesn't mean there were 695 individual children that were being commented on, but I just wondered whether you knew how many of those are repeats. I assume some are repeats, and whether we get some sense of just what the numbers are here.
Yes, I think this is one of the areas that's still evolving for us, Commissioner, in terms of understanding the effectiveness and the impact of Operation Encompass. Again, for the public, this was the initiative that when a domestic abuse incident occurs in an environment where children are present, this is the police making a notification, often the following morning, to the school that they attend, to make them aware of that. And the purpose of that is to make sure that the school are able then to provide any lifetime support to the child, and also to understand there may be other factors going off in the personal life which may be affecting them during their day or period in school over the days and weeks to follow. So it's still very much evolving. In terms of the volume that we have put there in the report, 695 alert notifications, they are in effect sort of one-way notifications into the schools, and some of those will be more than one children in a household potentially, or us returning to a house again and again alerting the school because it's a repeat domestic incident. I don't have any specific data around the numbers of repeats that these are, and that's something that we will ask the question of from our domestic abuse risk assessment manager, a central team there, to see whether that information is available and what impact that's having. So it is still very, very early stages, but a valid point and one which we will take up a central perspective to see whether or not there is any more information, and also what's the impact of the referrals, because often when these go into the school, then it's not sort of a two-way flow of information back from the school to ourselves as to what's happened with that information, where the school will have a link with social services as necessary and have their own plans around welfare and well-being of children within their education establishment. So we will follow that one.
Okay. Yes, I'd be interested in that, and whether you have any rules of thumb, like, you know, if there's more than 2 repeats, 3 repeats, then that's more serious and needs escalating in some way, or whether it's all a matter of judgment.
Yeah, I think the important thing around this is that we recognise it's a repeat incident of domestic abuse, regardless of it being linked to Operation Encompass. Encompass just provides an additional safeguarding mechanism for children that may well be in that environment. So We would be aware of it being a repeat location by the fact that we're being called there. It's a domestic related incident.
Okay, thank you. And then down a little further down the page, 5.8, and this is an area which is of considerable national importance at the moment, child neglect. And you mentioned there in the last 3 months 60 children have been recorded as victims of child neglect, and I wondered if you could just say a little bit around that, whether this is about half of the course or it's a growing area, or...
Yeah, I think in terms of our priorities in Barnsley and across the force, child neglect, child protection is absolutely at the top of our attention and focus, and the force have been doing and continue to do a significant amount of work with our partners to educate our own staff and to look out for and spot the signs of neglect. The force is undertaking a significant period of training at the moment in relation to child matters, very similar to the training programme that we did in relation to domestic abuse last year. And this really is sort of making sure that our officers, our staff, are recognising potential neglect at the earliest opportunity, are making sure that they're putting the vulnerable child referral forms in, which then trigger a potential response from our partners. And with that, and linked into the earlier point I made around the importance of the force recording accurately crimes, we are recording those incidents and crimes at the absolute earliest opportunity, which will account for that significant increase. I think that's a positive from a policing point of view and from a partnership point of view, which the public can take some real confidence around how seriously we treat neglect and matters in the national media this week. Really bring this into focus. This is really important for the police in Barnsley, for the police across South Yorkshire, and we will continue to look for, record and investigate with some vigour reports of child neglect.
Absolutely. Tim?
Just to reinforce what James just said, and I'm not going down in a second, we've invested an awful lot in this in the last 12 months. Child matters training, we've built on the success of the domestic abuse matters training to make sure that our staff have the very best opportunity to be able to identify and deal with neglect. It's something that we'll always deal with in partnership, predominantly with children's services on the respective districts. In terms of the volume, I think I'm right in saying that, with the exception of the West Midlands Police and the Metropolitan Police Service, we record the highest number of child neglect investigations of any metropolitan force. And it will show, if you look at the raw stats, will show a significant increase. That doesn't necessarily mean there's more child neglect and it's increasing. It means that we're far better at identifying it, we record it properly, and we work effectively with social services to make sure that we deal with it, and where it's appropriate, we will prosecute those in charge of children who are guilty of that offence.
Yeah, just to say that our entire public-facing workforce would have received all that child matters training by probably the first couple of weeks in April of next year, and we've developed, as Mr. Forbes said, part of that work, working closely with our 4 local authority partners. We've developed a risk assessment tool that makes it really easy for our officers to identify a number of various strands of neglect, so that we can talk the same language as our local authority partners, which is key. In actual fact, in every serious case review I've ever read across the country, not saying I've read them all, but I've read a fair few over my years of experience, communication is one of the key contributing factors, making sure that information is exchanged between key partners, and certainly the statutory partners. So this tool, which is the first to be developed and the first to be used by a police force in the country, is a really positive point, and we are liaising with national teams, College of Policing, around how we can sort of share this good practice that we're doing.
So it was developed here,
in
South Yorkshire.
Yeah,
that's very good.
developed here with our partners in the NSPCC.
Yes. Thank you. Page 22, this is section 5.19. Looking towards Christmas, the festive season and all that, and you say that you're refreshing your annual Operation Blitz, and I think people would be interested just to know a little bit about Blitz and what you're proposing to do there.
You're on mute, James.
It's all right, I've just unmuted it. There we go. Yes, so Operation Blitz, it is the Barnsley plan for policing primarily of the nighttime economy on the lead up to the Christmas period, and what we would usually anticipate as a rise in sort of potential violent crime, antisocial behaviour linked to drinking, etc. This year, clearly with the sort of broader context in respect of violence against women and girls, that the plan has been refreshed with a real focus around not only more serious violence, but the violence against women and girls, and also domestic abuse. So that is an initiative which principally is around sort of education and reassurance. We'll be having sort of enhanced patrols in and around the town centre, and undertaking a range of initiatives on the days when you would anticipate things to be slightly busier than others. But principally it's about promoting safety in the town centre, making sure that people are able to enjoy the festive period in good spirits, but also making sure that people can feel safe and be assured by the presence of the police in the town centre principally, as they go about their festivities.
So does that mean seeing more police? Is that part of it?
Yeah, so as part of an example around this, we would look for certain days to increase the number of police officers that are on patrol during certain evenings, Friday, Saturday evenings, for example. But again, over the last couple of weeks, we've had a number of initiatives in and around Barnsley Town Centre where we've run specific operations. Operation Duxford was mentioned earlier. We ran another one recently, Operation Sidewinder, and that was about specifically for drugs actually linked to the town centre activities that attract a degree of antisocial behaviour element. So we do run from time to time these initiatives. They are often led by our town centre team, but it's principally around putting more officers on patrol in visible places in and around the town centre, in the locations where people are going about enjoying the festive period.
Thank you. Looking now at under the heading Tackling Crime and Antisocial Behaviour, and this is 6.4, I'm just intrigued by this paragraph here about in November 2021, Barnsley have obtained 2 tracking devices to support the application of directed patrols in hotspot areas, and then you've got a little map. I wonder if you could just explain what that is and how that works.
Yeah, of course. Again, this is about us trying to make use of some innovation and technology from elsewhere in the organisation. And as part of the violent crime funding and the establishment of the GRIP team, part of the way that team works is that some tracking devices were deployed with officers that are on the GRIP team to be able to demonstrate to communities actually what the visible presence looks like. And in effect, that's what you see demonstrated there in a map, really, of the actual amount of time physically.
What is it? What is a tracking device?
Yeah, so it is a device whereby it measures, it monitors where the officer or the device is, generally by GPS tracking. So you can visibly see it on a map, but it also shows you how long the officers were actually in that area. So whilst it's not that easy to see on the report, the sort of dark yellow dots that are in the centre of the map there sort of outline the actual roads, the streets you were on that location and at what time. So as you zoom into those maps, you get a much closer look at where officers are physically spending their time. Now, the technology we were using as part of the GRIP team project across the force around violent crime, we've been utilising some of those devices when those officers haven't been out on patrol, so we managed to secure, just as a trial, 2 devices. But we wanted to do that in areas that are linked to other types of crime, and burglary being one of our priorities. We wanted to test this concept so that actually members of the public who are living in geographic areas affected by burglary can actually see the time that officers are spending on patrol in their areas, often when they're asleep. So the map that you see on 6.4 is an example of a period of direct patrol that took place. I believe it was overnight actually in the Thurnscoe area where we'd seen a bit of an urgent issue in relation to burglary, and it's a good way from an assurance point of view, from a management perspective, that when we're in the morning sat in our daily management meetings looking at where the crime hotspots are and tasking our officers to patrol those hotspots during the course of the night, the next morning in effect we get almost sort of lifetime information that tells us exactly how many of those patrols took place and for how long. So in that one map that you can see there, we were able to show that on that night the officer patrolled that particular area for 4 hours 6 minutes, and during that time there were no reported burglary dwelling offences that took place. What we're looking to do now is to see how we can make use of that information through our social media reports to communities, to actually let them know we've spent time in this area looking at the issues that are important to local people. So it's use of new technology for us, something that we're trying, but so it's something that at this stage appears to be offering some really good results, both in terms of assurance that our officers are out doing what they want them to do, but also for community reassurance in terms of this is where officers were at 3 o'clock in the morning when you were safely tucked up in your bed.
Mm. And it also means that those people who occasionally write to me and say the police never come round our area, you actually can say, well, yes, they do, and here's the evidence. So that's good to know. Thank you. On to page, well, it's 6.16, and you mentioned there that Barnsley has been selected by the Home Office to take part in a pilot scheme called, it's another of these Downing Street threesomes, I suppose, Clear, Hold and Build. Could you just say what that is and what that's all about?
Yes, absolutely. So Clear, Hold and Build is an approach to tackling serious and organised crime, which is been sort of trialled nationally, and as part of that, in terms of our focus in Barnsley and in South Yorkshire to becoming outstanding in this area, we wanted to be at the forefront of testing and trialling that initiative within a particular area that warranted it. Clear, Hold and Build is in effect a partnership tactic, which is in 3 phases. And in essence, what we're talking about here is identifying an organised crime group that may have a foothold in a particular area, and then working with partners to systematically target and dismantle that group in 3 phases. The first phase of that is to clear the group, and that is absolutely about overt police and partnership activity to disrupt, dismantle, deter, prosecute offenders. That might see activities such as proactive patrols, stop searches of individuals, where there's intelligence there that would give grounds to search those individuals. It will involve arrests of people that we are now out committing offences in those areas. It would mean targeted activity with partners, sometimes involving executions of search warrants at their home addresses, with the aim of really having an impact on the group and in effect clearing the ground, which is what the first phase is. The second phase, Hold, is about having cleared that ground. It is to make sure that the police and partners don't just walk away, and that we sort of maintain our presence in that area and prevent other individuals trying to step into the void of organised criminals that were previously operating in there. And the third phase is Build, and that is sort of more medium to long-term community resilience work with partners, with business, to actually make communities more resilient to organised crime themselves, and to have less reliance on police and partner agencies having to have that physical presence. So that's the initiative. We are piloting in one particular area in Barnsley at the moment. I don't intend to go into too much detail about the specifics of that, but it's certainly if I refer you back to some of the earlier results that we had in operation in Duxford, we have been targeting a particular group there, and I've had some real successes over recent weeks and months as we are in the clear phase. And as you'll know, on page 19, 4.9, some of the activity that we undertook on Operation Duxford was targeted towards some of those criminals, and did lead to recovery of large quantities of drugs and other items, as is outlined in the report. So a good initiative, still very, very early stages, working very closely with the Home Office and our partners around this initiative. And once we know more about how effective it's been, we'll be able to evaluate it and look at how we can share any good practice and learning more widely across the organisation.
Yeah, I appreciate you don't want to say too much at this moment, but I think in some future report it'd be good to have some catch up on that and how that's gone. That'd be good. Thank you.
Okay.
On 6.17, the next paragraph, in fact, you're talking there about the neighbourhood policing team. Well, you're talking about all of them, but you're talking about the team in the centre of town. I have had some concerns raised with me by members of the public in Barnsley and also some of the retail managers about work that you do there that leads to the displacement of people, homeless people, beggars, that sort of thing, out from the very centre, out down towards Asda, that direction. I just wonder if you could say something around that. There's just this sense of, well, if you crack down here, it pops up somewhere else. And is that just inevitable, or do you see what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think this is a particular issue that, again, from a Barnsley police and partner perspective, we're absolutely tuned into. In terms of the problem of tackling sort of this nature of antisocial behaviour is that there will inherently be a displacement effect with some of the sort of visible activities that take place. So I referenced earlier some activities we took in the town centre in the last couple of weeks, Operation Sidewinder being one, and the impact of visible police officers and actually tackling the antisocial behaviour begging element within the town centre can lead to a degree of displacement, but that is not the solution in itself. And what is important is we sort of get in and try and find what the underlying reasons are as to why individuals are sort of participating in that activity, and look at what the solutions are to address any issues that might be impacting on them in terms of their own vulnerability, and how we can work with partners to improve that. So there will inevitably be a degree of displacement. What I would say in Barnsley is that the work that's been done over recent years as part of the town centre safety plan has significantly reduced down the cohort from, I think from memory, somewhere in the region of about 150 individuals sort of 3 years ago, down to about 15 individuals at the moment. But these are ones that were, despite the levels of engagement, despite the levels of support, there is still a continuing issue with in terms of antisocial behaviour and begging. Only last week I was at a meeting at Cabinet in Barnsley where this very issue was discussed in some detail. There was a fantastic presentation from Paul Ferguson and from Phil Hollingsworth from Barnsley BMBC. We talked about the impact of the town centre plan over the last 3 years, and a really meaningful discussion about the next steps that we need to take with our partner agencies and with business to address the issue. In relation to the impact on retail, again, only a couple of weeks ago, I went down and met with a business owner, with Dan Jarvis MP, who had experienced that displacement effect, really, that whilst it wasn't as visible in the town, it moved some individuals into a back street, and that was affected their business. So again, we're looking at how, when one activity or initiative is taken by police and partners, what is the disruption impact, and actually have we got plans in place to mitigate that and find alternative support provision for individuals that clearly need some degree of help that have been resistant to it in the past. So again, an important issue for Barnsley, an important issue for us as a partnership, and one that we're working very closely with the town centre team and with the council and elected members to work our way through.
Well, thank you for that. That's good to know. You obviously have a good relationship there with the local authority, and good to know that you had that discussion in Cabinet, I think. Thank you. The last thing I got is on page 26, 7.6, and that relates to speeding vehicles, and you say you're resuming these operation slowdowns to try and stop speeding in various parts of the borough. I just wonder how you choose those places, whether it's all your own intelligence or whether you listen to community groups, and how you can be sure you've got the right places, or indeed what you think the right places would be, what the evidence is that you use.
Yes, absolutely. I think a lot of it does, in all fairness, does come from communities, because in terms of intelligence reporting, we don't get that much intelligence reporting about locations of speeding vehicles. It tends to be more either the intelligence side of it comes from our own data regarding any sort of accident, black spots or anything like that. But principally, it comes from communities and our officers going out, engaging communities, listening to concerns. Social media is really helpful for us in regard, and we use social media to promote some of the initiatives and activities that we undertake. But again, through other mechanisms. So one for me is I met recently with Stephanie Peacock MP to sort of listen to issues that are important to members of the public in Stephanie's communities, and from that we had a specific conversation around speeding in the Hoyland area and a particular problem on a street, and as a consequence of that led directly to me speaking to the neighbourhood inspector and making sure that we were doing all that we could proportionate to address those issues that were important to local people. So speeding is absolutely an area where we very much rely on community feedback, either directly or indirectly via elected members, and then we put a proportionate response to that and communicate what we're doing to address the problem through social media.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. I think that's everything I wanted to say, Jane, or ask questions about on the report. Was there anything that you wanted to mention that you felt hadn't been mentioned? You don't have to?
No, nothing specific, Commissioner. I think just as an overall perspective from Barnsley, I just want to give assurance really that as a district, as all districts, we continue to work really, really hard, and our officers have worked and staff have worked exceptionally hard during a really difficult, busy period with the impact of the COVID pandemic and operational abstractions really to things such as COP26, the climate change event, and it's not just the districts that work hard. We recognise the impact from other parts of the organisation that have really assisted, such as our operational support team that really helped in that period in planning those abstractions to make sure that we were able to continue to deliver excellent service to the community of Barnsley more widely, and that's been done. So it was absolutely a hats off to all of those for that effort. But nothing else of significance for us, and our priorities going forward absolutely are focused on things that we've talked about today, particularly the impact around violent crime, violence against women and girls during the festive period, but also our continued efforts around domestic abuse, neighbourhood crimes, and in particular child protection and child rights. Okay,
thank you very much indeed. I seem to have seen quite a bit of you recently, but
you have. Yes.
Anyway, you're obviously well established in Barnsley. That's really good. Thank you very much, James. Thank you for that.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner.
That was item 10. We're on to item 11, which is the forced performance against the police and crime plan, and it's the third of our priorities, treating people fairly. Again, this may be Tim, is it, that's answering this? We won't go through everything, and we may not have time to do even the things that I picked out because of our technological difficulties, but if I can take you to one or two things and then we'll see how we get on. So I'm on page 32. This is under performance summary assessment, and it's item 3.6, probably come as no surprise to you. This is around workforce representation. I think it would be true to say that what we all look for is a workforce, police workforce, that represents the community it serves and looks like the community it serves. And I think we all thought that as far as officers go, that this period of uplift and the increase in officer numbers would give us a chance to improve that ratio of ethnic minorities in particular within the police force, and it doesn't seem to be being borne out, and this troubles me a little bit because clearly the uplift is considerable, and within a year or so that'll be it. It's that one of those once in a generation things, but it doesn't seem to be happening. We seem to be, if not standing still, then possibly even falling back. And when the census figures come out and tell us what the ethnic minority breakdown of South Yorkshire is, these figures are likely to look even worse than they are. So I think there's a cause for real concern here, and I just wonder if you could say a word about what you're doing to address this, because at the moment it looks as if whatever it is we're doing, either not enough is being done, or it's not intensive enough, or it's simply not working.
Yeah, I think first of all what I'd say, Commissioner, is that the Chief Constable and I share your concerns. This is having a workforce that looks like and represents the community is a fundamental part of policing by consent, so we absolutely understand the importance of this as an issue. If I perhaps shape my answer around 3 different strands, firstly about confidence, the confidence of communities in South Yorkshire Police, which is a key determinant on whether people want to join us. Secondly, I'll talk a little bit about recruitment, and then a bit about retention, all of which are equally important. In terms of confidence, you're well aware of the investment we've made in neighbourhood policing. You're well aware of the efforts that we make to engage with our communities, and the efforts that we've gone to, particularly with the assistance of the independent ethics panel, to be transparent about those issues that affect minority communities more than others. We're doing as much as we can to continue to improve confidence in communities, and that will continue as we move forward throughout Uplift and continue to develop our neighbourhood policing officer and continue to work with communities. As regards recruitment, certainly the Chief and I absolutely recognise the need to do more. And certainly in the middle of this year, we decided to appoint a full-time inspector as a positive action lead to coordinate and better coordinate some of our efforts around this. What that has led to is the appointment and training of positive action leads in every neighbourhood policing team across the county. That's then led to, throughout the course of the summer and into the autumn, a range of meetings, touchstone points, opportunities where we've engaged with communities, where we have the opportunity to access people from different communities, and you'll see on page 34 of the report a list of where that has taken place. We've come up with a range of new communication materials to hand out to highlight the opportunities that career in policing offers people, and to make sure that people are under no are in no doubt that there is no one type of police officer. An effective police force, and particularly an effective police force policing a metropolitan area like South Yorkshire, needs to be made up of different communities of people with different life experiences, a different understanding of communities, and a whole range of different skills. We have undertaken and will continue to undertake a series of workshops with people who come from different communities to demystify the process of applying for the police. There's obviously a number of different stages to go through. It's really important that, particularly where we've got people who come from communities where there might be less confidence in the application process, that we demystify that for people. And through the Race, Inclusion and Equity Association that's been formed through colleagues from different communities in the organisation, we've developed a network of mentors now where we can make sure that people who are from different communities, from different minority communities, have access to that to help them through the application process. So an awful lot is being done, but the reality is that we've started some of that work in the middle of the summer. It's reached some intensification in the autumn. We are monitoring the figures very, very closely. We hope that when we go through the next recruitment campaign, we start to see the benefit of some of that. But it's equally important. It's not just getting people into the organisation, it's about retaining people. It's making sure that we've got an organisational culture that's inclusive, that's welcoming, and recognises the talents that everyone brings to policing. So we now have the Equality Hub, which provides a framework for us to far better engage with a whole range of staff from across SYP, from representing all sorts of different communities.
Do you think South Yorkshire Police have started late?
I have heard it said we're starting from a really low base. I'm not so sure I'd characterise it like that. I think certainly since the middle of this year, the Chief and I sat down, had a really long, hard look at where we are, and we decided to intensify our efforts and to invest a full-time inspector in it, given some of the resource and challenges we have across the force. I think represents a really significant investment on our behalf.
Just on the installation of Shakil Ahmed, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you think that's enough in terms of resource? I mean, I'm fishing around in my memory, but I seem to remember a time when we had 3-4 outreach officers, I think they were called, who used to do something like this, but one inspector?
Yeah, I think what we have now is a situation where we have a sort of single subject matter expert practitioner who's supported by a network of people across the force. So we have people from our people and organisational development who are supporting him through some of the application process, familiarisation events. We have people from the various networks which form the Equality Hub, providing sort of mentoring support, practical support. And actually I think for me it's more about it becoming embedded in everybody's business, so our neighbourhood teams, knowing that they can speak to people from different communities about joining the police, policing and the different opportunities that it offers. Personally, I think that's a much more embedded and sort of stable approach than leaving it in the hands of 4 people and everybody else thinking, well, it's over to them to sort that out. It becomes everybody's business to make sure we bring people in.
And the importance of we've made such an investment in neighbourhood policing. The importance of some of this being driven by neighbourhoods. And certainly when I went to open the training that Shaq put on for our neighbourhood ambassadors, there was all sorts of different communities represented in the room, and every single neighbourhood policing team was represented. So it really,
And I went to the launch of the Race, Inclusion and Equity Association. I was very impressed by the people in that room and the determination of them to try and see a difference, make a difference.
Obviously we've got a new equality, diversion and inclusion strategy. There's the Free to Be South Yorkshire campaign, which talks again about anyone from any background, their ability to be able to have a career that flourishes and be included, feel included and supported within the SYP. There's also the issue of our training offer. We've introduced the police educational qualifications framework. We've invested an awful lot in that. It's making sure that our career offer lines up against many other employees, not just other police services. So the investment in the central assessment team, the investment in tutors to manage that big influx of new recruits has been really significant. But it's important because when people do join, we want them to have a really positive experience. We want them to have access to the very best training and support to enable them to get through that difficult transition of going from a raw recruit into a fully operationally competent police officer over 2 years. And if we're to maintain that retention rate, it's really important that we do that. We're also investing.
Sorry, just on you mentioned retention, and that clearly is important. Not just bringing people into the force, but actually keeping them in the force. And I know there are other forces where they've been very good at getting them in through the door, but not very good at keeping them there. So that clearly is important. You mentioned leavers in the report. I think it's probably 3.22, is it, in there? Police leavers from an ethnic minority heritage steadily increased. That's a bit worrying, the leavers from an ethnic minority background. Do we understand why they're leaving? Is there a common theme, or are we able to talk to them all? Or?
We do exit interviews, and we've undertaken a new programme of exit interviews. It's very difficult to say because the numbers are so small. Right. That whilst the report gives you percentages, the numbers are really, really small, so it's very difficult to suggest that there's a trend or particular reasons. Again, I mentioned it before, and I'll just reinforce it, the importance of having a good leadership offer when people do join, and we have leaders who have the requisite skills to be able to undertake that vital role of frontline supervisor and support people and recognise difference within teams and be able to do it effectively. So we've invested in the Leadership Academy, which is a significant programme of work to make sure that in particular, our frontline leaders have the skills and abilities to be able to manage a diverse workforce. and we've also invested in a new Sergeant's Technical Skills programme to make sure that in particular our sergeants have the skills and abilities to be able to bring people on and develop them in the right way. So I suppose I'll finish where I started. We absolutely recognise this is an issue. Whilst we've intensified our effort in the last 6 months, this has been an issue for all the 25 years I've been a police officer. Bearing in mind, I joined the police in the aftermath of the McPherson report, and this was being talked about then. Policing is still nationally struggling with this, so there is no easy answer. We are determined to do our very, very best. I think, given this is a public meeting, I just want to finish and re-emphasise the fact South Yorkshire Police absolutely must represent all the communities. There is no one type of police officers. We need people from all communities, people who have a commitment to public service, who are bright, have the ability to get to grips with the complexity that we face on a day-by-day basis as a police service. And we're absolutely open to all communities.
Yes. No, it's good to have that reaffirmed, but it's clearly an important matter, and it's important anyway, but it's important for us in South Yorkshire to get this right. But clearly it's an important national target as well, that the police force nationally sorts itself out in this respect. It's very difficult, I accept that. And I think there's a willingness on the part of the communities, certainly the communities I go into and talk to, that they want us to get this right, they want you to get this right, and there's a frustration that we don't seem to be making the progress that everybody would think was hoping for.
Where we seem to have successes where you get individual cases and you meet somebody who wants to join and you can wrap some support around them and track their career, and we need to keep doing that. The point we need to get to is that critical mass, and when you get to a critical mass, then I think it's suddenly become quite a bit easier, but we're not there yet, and we recognise that.
Okay. Lauren, did you want to add it?
I'll just echo the points that Tim's made really. I think there's something really key about building up to that critical mass, because I strongly believe that until people start to see the visibility and see themselves represented, they perhaps don't see this as a career of choice, as an employer of choice, while it absolutely is. So there's a really lot of effort going on at the moment to actually helping us build that initial critical mass.
Okay.
We've seen it in other areas. I mean, I think you go back 9 years ago, there'd never been a female chief officer in this force, ever. And, that is a very, very different picture today. We've seen that not just within the top team, but right across our senior roles with senior detectives, people working in operations support, firearms, public order, because we've reached a critical mass, and all of a sudden, you see, we've seen that no longer be a particular issue in the force. So I'm convinced that we can do it in respect of ethnic minority representation across the force, but getting to that critical mass is really critical.
Okay. Thank you. Well, it's something we'll obviously be returning to, so we'll keep an eye on. Thank you. I noticed Anne is on the call, Anne McCaskill. I don't know whether, Anne, you wanted to comment on this. I didn't give you any warning of that, but...
Well, it's something that the equity leads have been looking at, and we've been monitoring the whole new recruitment process. And the independent ethics panel we have been impressed, by all the initiatives that are being taken. And now it looks like there's a momentum building up. I think we had a feeling initially that there was a lot of talk about what was going to happen, but there was a lack of momentum. But that now seems to be building up, and the momentum's building. So I think there's a feeling it's all very positive. There's some concerns about retention, and I've actually got a meeting planned with the chair of the Race, Inclusion and Equity Association, the chair and the deputy chair, and that was one of the issues that we're going to talk about with them, to see if there are any roles that the independent ethics panel could have there.
Oh, that's good. That's Pamela Russell. And yeah, good. Oh, thank you. Well, thank you very much. That's good to know, and I'm glad the Independent Ethics Panel feel that, and that there is momentum, Anne puts it. If I can turn now to fair allocation of resources, this is page 37 in my pack. It's paragraph 3.29. It's the final bullet point. Interested in the armed crime team, which we've mentioned many times here before. I just wonder if you could say a little bit about that. Established in July 2020, seems to have been really good in the work that it's done and impressive results and so on. I suppose just the anxieties around, is it, do you have to pull resources from somewhere else to make this work? And can you actually keep it going as a result of that? Can you roll it out to Doncaster and Barnsley rather than?
The answer to that, quite simply, is yes, we can. It's been a huge success. It was set up in response to some of the issues that we have in Sheffield. It has been a huge success. The plan is to absolutely mainstream it, and we are going to put more resources into it as we start to grow as a force, because the impact of being able to have a unit that operates in that way does undoubtedly take firearms off the street, has undoubtedly brought more offenders to justice, and absolutely we can end it as a way of operating.
Okay, thank you. On page, I'm not sure you've got the same page numbers as me, but page 39 in my pack, it's para 3.44. You mentioned this earlier about the leadership academy and so on. It seems a really good idea. But as I understand it, people put themselves forward for the Leadership Academy. Now, I wondered whether that was, well, I'm sure you want willing volunteers, but on the other hand, do you also want to be able to spot people and say you ought to be putting yourself forward? Is that part of it, or does that not happen?
So, I think the first thing to say with the Leadership Academy is not just about supervision, it's for everyone, because we want people to be peer leaders and be leaders amongst their peers. There's a range of different inputs, ranging from the short to a full day course. It is a voluntary thing, but in and amongst that, you know, our expectations among supervisors is that they're out there spotting staff, encouraging people as they sit down and have one-to-one discussions with people. They're using the offer of the Leadership Academy as part of people's continuing professional development, and certainly for anyone aspiring for promotion, in terms of, you know, answering that question, what have you done to develop yourself towards promotion? And there'll be an absolute expectation that they engage with the Leadership Academy, that they can point to how they have developed as a person and as a leader in terms of their executive skills as a result of engaging with the Leadership Academy. So we're really confident that the offer is as good as you'll get in any organisation, and that as it grows over the course of the next year, and there will be more modules added throughout the course of next year, its popularity amongst our workforce will increase.
Okay, thank you. On page 40, well, just to say, victims and witnesses, this is an area that I think will figure quite highly in the new police and crime plan as that is developed, so I won't linger on that, but take you on to page 42, and it's 3.62, Operation Pony,
Yep.
which is nothing to do with the mounted division, I guess. Indeed, very different from that. A bespoke operation established to identify and deal with those who abuse their position for sexual purposes. I mean, clearly a matter of great public concern and interest at the moment. I wondered if you could just reassure me that this is not something that's happened simply because of what's happened nationally, but this is something that South Yorkshire Police have
This is something that we've developed.
always been doing.
I think certainly long before my time as deputy.
Yeah, I think Operation Pony's now been in place for about 3 years.
Yeah.
So the previous chief was the MPCC lead for counter-corruption and APSP matters come into that. I've recently taken on the lead of that portfolio, so this falls squarely within my sort of national remit. And it is something that is absolutely embedded here in South Yorkshire and was quite important in us achieving our outstanding grade for our lawful and ethical behaviour in previous HMIC inspections. So it's embedded, it's here to stay, and we're doing a lot more, I think, to make people understand just how important it is, and particularly raising awareness amongst the workforce about spotting signs of concerning behaviour by colleagues and how they can then report that in addition to the Operation Pony activity itself.
It's clearly something that people will find difficult to do, but absolutely necessary and essential that they do it.
I think people are finding it less difficult to report concerns about their colleagues. I think recent events have focused attention fairly sharply on this as an area, and people absolutely recognise that it's right to speak out, it's right to raise their concerns. We've got a confidential sort of reporting mechanism which does get used, and I don't think I'm hugely concerned that people don't have the ability to speak out. We've recently done a survey across the force which shows that the vast majority of our workforce of women officers understand how they can report concerns about colleagues.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you. I think I've probably ended the questions I got, but Anne, if you may have vanished. Has Anne vanished from the screen? Possibly.
Yes.
Oh no, you're still there. And stop and search. I wondered whether you had anything to say around that, any updates, because there's not a formal independent ethics panel report today.
Yeah, well, it's been quite exciting. We're quite excited about the work that's going on in Stop and Search, because for the last few years there has been a wish to set up, the public scrutiny panels, but vetting has always been an issue. But from a meeting we had with Sarah Gilmer last week, it looks like there's a system now in place. They started to recruit. There will be public panels hopefully set up in January, where the vetting of both body-worn video and other reports until body-worn video is available for every Stop and Search. The written reports will also be available for scrutiny, but there's a push on to try to increase the use of body-worn video for Stop and Search, because that's obviously the ideal from the perspective of vetting them. And then there'll be an SYP internal panel to look at Stop and Search. And really quite excited about both of them, and there looks to be a lot of public interest, and Sarah's been doing events. I think she had 2 last week to raise interest and tell the public about it, and there's another 2 events coming up this week. They have developed all the kind of paperwork for people to fill in, and there's someone, I'm sorry I don't remember his name, but he's an officer that's seconded to the National 365 project, and he was sitting in on our meeting and on our vettings, and he was very excited about what was going on, because his feeling was that SYP were ahead on this, and the other forces were very interested in what was happening in SYP, because it looks like there's a potential for a very effective system. And we ran a pilot with Sarah last week, where we actually went in and did it, but then we're going to do another one before Christmas, a purely online one, to make sure that the body-worn video clips will work in that setting. So there's a lot of progress.
Good. Well, thank you very much. I'm glad I asked. Too much excitement in one day. Anything to add, or are you okay? Well, thank you very much indeed for that report. So that was all under force performance, the item number 11. Chief Executive Reports. Michelle, this is you. Item 12, PCC Strategic and Financial Planning Update. That's a verbal report.
Yes, Commissioner, it's just a verbal update today to say that everything is on track in terms of the Planning and Efficiency Group meetings and the discussions with force colleagues following the annual planning process. We've got the first iteration of the plan, the Police and Crime Plan, that will be released in February, March time next year. So that just needs to be discussed with you in terms of certain steers and how you want things presenting this week, and then can go to SYP colleagues and others for consultation. It won't be finalised until February, and things are still changing, like we've had the drugs strategy announced today nationally, so things will change that will require tweaks before it's submitted to the panel in February. And so the 2 substantive reports today are around Sophie's work with finance teams to look at the certainties and uncertainties in budget setting, and then Fiona has got a written report in relation to the results of the public priorities survey that feeds into the plan.
Thank you. Has the drug strategy been announced?
I don't think so
We don't
yet.
seem to know. No.
There's a statement in Parliament at 6.
6 o'clock. 6 o'clock today. Okay. Thank you. Thanks very much, Michelle. So item 12A then. Sophie, this is budget setting updates, including Chancellor's announcement, a verbal report. Are we broke?
It is. Yes, Commissioner, the Chancellor announced a 3-year settlement at the end of October. There is a Home Office settlement for 3 years, but there is a suggestion at this stage that within policing we will get a 1-year settlement which will be refined over the next 2 years. The settlement centrally included an additional 550 million for 22-23, and then that rises to 650 and 800 million over the following 2 years of the CSR period. That will support police officer uplift, the police officer uplift programme, which ends in the next financial year, and we're still budgeting for an additional 205 officers locally. So that comprises 187 from the national uplift, and then a further 18 that we were already budgeting for separately locally. The settlement also allowed for a maximum of a £10 precept increase, and that seems to be the figure that the government is working on for its allocations. The Home Office has done well on the face of it, and then we've had to try and look at what that means for us locally. We haven't had a provisional settlement. That's not due out until around the 16th of December, so that will be the date when we find out what we're likely to get in this final settlement, which comes 4 weeks after that. But we've done a lot of modelling with the Finance Department. There are still uncertainties that we're working through. There's a pay award, which the pay freeze has been lifted now, so that will go to an independent review body. And then there's the national insurance increase of 1.25%, which kicks in April. They're two of the main challenges for us, amongst others. Others include uplift, central charges for ESN and things like that, and legacy issues, as well as rising inflation. So we're just working through the figures. We're putting some options together at this stage around what we know and looking at different precept options. When we find out on the 16th of December, we'll be able to undertake some further, more specific consultation with the public and other partners around what that looks like in time to get the final budget figures together for presentation to the Police and Crime Panel in February. I think that's it in a nutshell, unless you have any questions.
It's going to be very difficult for us to put a figure in the budget for pay when we don't know what the pay award is.
It's very difficult. We have national groups that we're trying to benchmark with, but the pay award is subject to, that goes through an independent review body. So it depends on the findings of that body as to what the pay award will be. We can put in a best estimate as to what we think it might be, but there are two perspectives to it. There's something about being fair to staff and valuing staff, but also from an employer's perspective in terms of affordability. So you're right, it is a fine balance, and we're just working through that at the moment as to what we think might be the best estimate to put in the budget.
And would it be true to say that when the government says that so much is available for funding the police, they assume that everybody will put that £10 on a Band property increase in the precept? Is that their assumption?
I would expect that would be the assumption this year. It has been in previous years that the precept will be maximised everywhere, really. And anything that's less than a maximum increase will be of detriment to our budget. Yeah.
Thank you. Just to cheer myself up, that's all.
Yes, sorry.
I don't think, unless fourth colleagues have a question. Okay.
No, thank you.
Thanks very much, Sophie. Shall we look then at 12B, which is Peace and Priorities Survey Results and the launch of the Precept Consultation Fiona.
Thank you. I've got the report in front of you. I'll just go through it briefly and pick out a few headlines. So the survey was opened up, an online survey that took place during October. We closed that at the end of October with 712 responses. When we looked at analysing the results, they were mostly over 35s and mostly from a white background. So we have opened it back up again, and we're looking at targeting some younger people and people from ethnic minorities just to get a bit more of a spread in there. So this report in itself is just an interim report at the moment, and it will be updated once we've undertaken that further engagement and consultation. The key headlines were around a third of the people that responded had actually had contact with South Yorkshire Police in the last 12 months. Some of that was just through engagement events and others, and some was direct contact with the victims of crime. 80% feel safe or very safe in the areas where they live. And when it came to priorities, we provided a list of the priorities and asked them to identify their issues. I'm going to just say that not all respondents answered each question, so within the report we've given their sort of figures for the number of people that answered the individual questions. But identifying proper priorities from a list given, the most popular priorities were tackling neighbourhood crimes, such as burglary, antisocial behaviour, etc., tackling gang crime and investigating serious crime, CSE, and child abuse. They came out really strongly as the top priorities across all areas. Then we asked individuals to identify policing issues that were the biggest problem in their area, and this was a free text box. So we used then sort of keyword, analysed that through keywords, and the list that you've got there in front of you at 4.9 puts those in a priority number of responses that we've got. So you can see quite clearly within their areas people were more concerned around drugs and drug dealing, burglary, ASB and road safety, including speeding, were the top 4 priorities there. And that pretty much echoes what we pick up when we do engagement with the public face-to-face as well. There's a similar percentage of responses coming through on there. We then asked them to say within their area the problems within their, the policing issues in their area, and just rank them in areas of importance. And again, you'll see from there tackling crime and ASB through prevention was very high. But if you look down the list, of the list, all the lists that we gave them that are there on the bullet points, the bottom one was still 67%. So I think it's fair to say that all areas of importance when it comes to policing issues in people's areas. While some were very high, I think even the ones at the bottom there are still a very high number. The final question we asked them was just in advance of the statutory consultation that we do around the council tax preset, and that was just to ask people whether they would be willing to pay more in their council tax. Again, that was evenly split. 1/3 said they can afford to pay a little bit more, 1/3 said they couldn't afford to pay any more, and the other third said they were prepared to pay a little bit more, but round about inflation. That was at the time around 3%. I understand that's now gone up even further. So the next stages for this are we're just going to do another couple of weeks where we're just pushing through to target some other groups and demographics across South Yorkshire and see whether that actually changes the results any, and then they'll be fed into your, the development of the policing crime plan early in the new year.
Thank you. Yes, I think inflation's running at over 4% at the moment.
Heading towards 5, I think.
Yeah. Anybody want any questions or comments? Just in terms of the numbers, Fiona, is this about what we expect year on year, or?
I think it's a little bit down on last year, and it was on the year before, but the year before was supplemented quite heavily with the face-to-face, which we haven't been able to do around the October time for this year. So, but we'll see what it pushes up to over the next couple of weeks when we've opened it back up again. I would have expected around about 1,000, so it was slightly down, but
okay.
probably so. We publicised it quite well and got a lot of support from partners retweeting it across social media and things as well.
Thanks. Let's see what happens. So, item 13 then, violence against women and girls. Graham, this is a report from yourself, pages 55 and 60 in my pack. Do you just briefly want to tell us about the report?
I didn't submit a report, sir, but it's meant to be a verbal update, which I've got in front of me, so if you've got a report, then you've done better than I have.
The pieces of paper that I've got, I won't dignify them with the word report, just bring us up to date. Violence against women and girls. What do we do?
You've heard some of the update because it was given in answer to the questions at the beginning, but I'll go through it quite quickly. The update is we've begun a series of engagement events to listen to the priorities of the people of South Yorkshire. The first event was in November. We have one booked for December, but that's at present under review. It's in person, so we've written out to people on Eventbrite who are booked on it to see whether they still want to attend in person, because the COVID news has changed since, although it's not formally changed in terms of gathering, it has. It's different from when we first booked that event, and then virtual events in January. There's lots of calls for action to all of the organisations around. So what we want to do before deciding what we're going to do more of or less of or do differently is to spend some time listening to what people of South Yorkshire think is the priority. There's a government strategy, there's a police strategy being developed and led by Nat Shaw. Nat is knowledgeable and dynamic and a fabulous voice for South Yorkshire, so I'm really grateful to the force for involving Nat. She will help this work happen. And as I say, we're going to use the intelligence to inform what we do differently. And as was mentioned earlier, there will be an independent advisory group to monitor and inform the work put together in January. There was a related piece of work, brief piece of work done on, and James mentioned spiking earlier. There was significant concern raised and questions asked about spiking, and whilst it's difficult to quantify, the VIU and the safety partnerships from the 4 local authorities have worked together to fund some anti-spiking kits. I think there was a concern as going up into the Christmas period that we wanted that option available to people. But it's part of obviously it's an optional protection for women to take if they wish to. But the wraparound work will also include training for bar staff and door staff to identify potential perpetrators and to keep women safe, including using the Ask Angela campaign. Spiking is a crime and it's an act of violence, so the end goal is not about women having to protect themselves, it's about changing male behaviour and the attitudes that sit behind it, which leads us into the campaign that was mentioned earlier. Through the Safer Streets Fund, £70,000 to target perpetrator behaviour and attitudes, and that will form part of the response. So the OPC comms team is working closely with local authorities to commission an agency to develop a high-profile media campaign to launch in the first quarter of 2022 that challenges those attitudes that perpetuate violence towards women. A brief will go out to agencies to express an interest. There'll be a short list and then invited to pitch ideas so that we have a good and strong campaign to address the attitudes. But one of the things that I've mentioned is from Safer Streets funding, South Yorkshire was successful in achieving some money, and that funding will be used to install innovative lighting and CCTV in 4 parks, one in each of the local authority areas, and that reflects in the survey done of women that outdoor spaces, park spaces, is one of the places where they feel less safe, particularly when it's dark. So Lock Park in Barnsley, Edenthorpe, Farfield Park in Doncaster, Clifton Park in Rotherham and Ponderosa Park in Sheffield will have the introduction of innovative lighting and cameras, and the work will be overseen by the local authority and the OPCC task and finish group to ensure it's done and returns provided to the Home Office. And the lessons learned from these, when this work is completed, discover what the effect is, whether these changes have a positive effect on feelings of safety and actual safety, and that may then be able to inform future design so that the open spaces can become safer. That was my update.
Thanks very much, Graham. I do have a report actually. It's called Appendix 1. Is that not? Has nobody else got Appendix 1? No?
Yes.
I've got it.
Okay.
So it was a summary I pulled together from Graham was on leave, so I pulled it
I
together
see,
for him.
okay.
That's
Well, there is a report, Graham. It's Appendix 1. So sorry about that.
Okay.
But it's
No,
more,
that's fine. I was told verbal. That's okay.
it's all right. It's more or less what you said, so that's fine. Thank you.
Okay.
So that was item 13, violence against women and girls, an update. Item 14, PCC decisions. Michelle's page 61.
Yes, Commissioner, there's only one decision of note for public interest on there, which is a crime management function investment.
Okay, thank you very much. Everybody happy with that? So item 15 is the work programme, 63 to 66. Anything to say about that, Michelle?
There's just two thematics coming up that are left. Graham's just done the violence against women and girls update. The other two areas of focus in your transitional police and crime plan, your current police and crime plan, are road safety and disproportionality in the criminal justice system. So we're planning January and February to give updates in relation to where we are with those. All three areas are likely to get a mention in the police and crime plan to carry forward, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you. So that brings us to item 16. Any other business? Does anybody have any other business at all? If not, can I thank everyone for their attendance today. Our next meeting is the 10th of January, which is after Christmas, of course. So I wish you all a very happy Christmas and a happy New Year. I hope you have a nice Christmas and New Year, whatever awaits us. It's these difficult times. But thank you. As to whether we'll be hybrid or in the room or virtual, we're not sure. I suspect we may be virtual, but we'll see. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Cheers.